Hi, all. Welcome to week 7, effective communication with colleagues, written communication. And so this week we're going to be talking about internal and external communication. Interagency minutes, we'll just have a quick look at that, and report writing in brief. So there were some handouts that came out this week. Have either Tanya or Amanda, have you seen the handouts? Interagency?
Yeah, I had a look.
Yeah. So I suppose the first one is also internal and external communication maps. Now I'll just open that up and get it up on the screen and share this screen. There's no PowerPoint being put together for this week, so it kind of makes it a little bit different. It's always good to have. Okay. All right, we should have the internal communication map up.
Mm-hmm.
Can I shrink that a little bit? Maybe not. All right. So within that, we've got internal. So within internal, this is all the different types of that's a picture, so I can't get it to kind of sit in between. So within that, we've got internal communication with clients, and then you've got individual or group, and then you've got formal or informal, and then you've got that's split down to whenever you speak to clients in an informal manner, it might be verbal or non-verbal, and then at the end of the communication chain, chatting at drop-in or texting a message. If it's formal, it might be client interview or non-verbal client behaviour contract. And if you haven't seen a client behaviour contract before, that just means that it's a contract for people when they're dealing with you. If they tend to be threatening or don't speak in a polite manner or things like that, and it's really hard to communicate, you might have a behavioural contract where you say, when we interact, if you don't behave in such a way, yada, 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 and you get them to sign it, it kind of just reinforces their behaviour and makes sure. So that's a very formal way of dealing with people, especially in a case management process. When you're talking about a group, informal is verbal, and then the end of the chain is brainstorming, social activities with a youth group, or non-verbal might be a message on social media about an event. If you're talking to a group formally, it might be a focus group of young people with key issues, or it might be minutes from a youth advisory group meeting. Communication with co-workers, individual. So informal, chat in the tea room, email to colleague. Formal, verbal, meeting with co-worker. Non-verbal, incident report to senior manager. Have either of you ever filled out an incident report before? OH&S. I've come in, I've got a keyboard injury, I've hurt my little finger by hitting enter or escape or whatever too much, so then might have to fill in an incident report. In an incident report, have to say, how did you hurt yourself? I have to hit enter. I'm only a 2-finger typer. I've got a blister on the end of my finger from typing with these 2 fingers. I've got a Band-Aid out, no further requirement. That's an incident report, maybe to a senior manager, or it might be that my colleague who sits next to me, wearing the footy tips together, they got a better score than me, so I threw a monitor at them. And so, it might be that. But, these are the things that you've got to look out for in a workplace, I suppose, depending on how good your workplace is. And then you've got communication with co-workers as a group. You might have informal, so staff bonding day. What a grand day that will be. It might be a trip to a restaurant. Everyone has a great meal and relaxes. Non-verbal, a poster in the tea room asking for ideas, or the most common poster that I see in a tea room is, can you please clean the dishes after yourself? And, so that might be a non-verbal thing. And I saw a really good one the other week, one that had a big picture of Martin Luther King, and he said, I had a dream that people will clean their dishes. And it went on, not for those who not for those who used them, but for those who wanted them. And I thought that's a really good one. It's that type of thing that's a non-verbal, informal communication to a group of people in your office. A formal way might be presentation in a staff meeting, and so you might have you might go in and you might have done some training, and you might go into your workplace and say, look, I did some training on case notes. These are some of the things that I got out of case notes, yada, 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 yada. And so you might do a presentation, and so your learning becomes group learning then. It might be that there's formal communication, it might be case notes or staff meeting minutes. So I suppose, and the other one, which should be down below it, is external communication. So communication with other agencies, individual, informal, verbal, a phone call to a family support worker at another agency. It could be that in a formal manner, you might be supporting another agency in perhaps a grant application. So they're looking to get some money, and so you support that. It could be you might be also where we go. It might be formal, non-verbal letter of support, or it might be a group, an informal way of speaking to them, speaking up an interagency meeting in a discussion, or a non-verbal way is writing up notes of an interagency brainstorming session or even meeting. It could be formal, but look, I can go through these one by one, but I think you get the idea. You guys have read them, and so
yeah.
The main thing I want to say is one of the examples that you see kind of on the screen, which are the ones that are probably written forms of communication? What are those?
Emails.
Yeah, emails.
Letters.
Pardon, what was that one?
Letter to the support.
Yeah.
Letter of support.
Yeah.
Memorandum.
Yeah.
The writing up notes.
So memorandum's just a memo.
Yeah.
Most common form of, in any bureaucratic office, everyone's got memos. Sending off memos to each other, informing each other what's going on. And so what do they have in common? What are some commonalities about those? If you think about, remember how we're talking about when I send a message, I encode and I decode. So just out of those, what's the most common thing about those things? What are they really doing?
I don't know what you mean.
Oh, sorry, I might not be explained. So I suppose with the written, when you're looking at written forms of communication, what are they doing normally? They're informing. Yeah, so they're just meant to be a formal way of informing someone of an idea or a concept, or definitely has information, but it's a way that information will be stored. So written information is normally in that written format, because you might want to go back and review it or look at it, or have some tangible evidence. And so within that, it differs directly. If you're going to do verbal, verbal is all about, well, nothing's captured. So what you're saying is quite different, and it doesn't need to be captured, perhaps. And so that's the difference. You're normally going into a written format in any way if you want that information to maybe be referred back on or to hold a bit more clout. The one thing that you know, I always think about anything written, people will take time to read it and absorb it a lot more. Where if you do a lot of verbal stuff, people, it might go in one ear and out the other. A lot of the written stuff you'll probably retain a lot better, especially because you can refer back to it, I think. Do you think, and within that, I suppose they're the weighing factors in a workplace, what you're going to use. So depending on what your outcome is going to be, you'll choose which one you're going to, whether it be verbal or non-verbal, you'll choose which one you use. You know, for me, in a workplace, I email people to death, so there's a chain. And so, but saying that, I suppose I do talk a lot at work too, and I'll throw out a lot of things as well. But I do email a hell of a lot as well, and I think I like to keep a record of just what's been going on. And I find the more formal things get, the more I'll email. And then if it goes to the next level, so I'm talking to, you know, the mayor, or if I'm talking to a CEO of council, etc., I'll start to throw things in memos a lot of the time, just so there's a fallback record of whatever promise I've made, or vice versa, just so nothing gets confused. And I think if you want to do that, that's why you're always going to go back and make sure that there's something written. It's a safe way of just ensuring that there's no confusion into the future. So we've got a formal, we'll get rid of that. Thanks, matey. So the other thing I wanted to look at is report writing. And so in report writing, so basic structure of a report, they can vary greatly. They can range from an experimental report to environmental impact statement. There is, however, a basic structure, you know, to all reports. And so what are they? Number one, title. So they've got the title at the top, and then they might have, and you might have seen them. Have you ever read a report that has, especially, it wouldn't normally have abstract. What it would have normally is exec summary, executives. Have you ever noticed that on anything you've read? No.
A couple times, yeah.
And all right, so that exec summary, it's basically, and you know, I get a lot of reports thrown at me. I just look for the exec summary, to tell the truth. The exec summary is basically, you might have a 200-page report, and the exec summary just goes, this is what this report's about. This is the main points. This is the outcome. And then I go, right, got it, move on. I normally won't take time to absorb myself in reports in depth because, you know, we all need some downtime. And I tell you, that takes up a lot of slice of your life, just reading reports that are that big. I'd always go to the exec summary and just say, has that told me enough information so I understand what just occurred in this research or whatever? And so that's the main thing. And normally a good executive summary will say exactly that. The rest of the report might be just, if you want to look at some of the hardcore evidence or something in greater detail, you might go to different sections. But really, the exec summary should say it all. And if you think 200 words, it might be one page. So I think might extend to 300. But that's what a good executive summary should do. Just summarize the whole thing, ready to go. Table of contents. And so it should have everything in there, all neatly sectioned off, and so people can find things, bits of information very easily. Should have an introduction. So just like a great novel, any report should set the scene, bit of background information, why this whole thing's put together, and maybe the aim and the purpose in there, and outline of the body section. So is that starting to make, if you think, what, have either of you written essays in your times?
Yes.
So essays, you're seeing a bit of a a parallel with this in that content and essays as well. So if you think basic essays, what are you doing? You're writing the introduction, you're writing the main body, there's all those parts, and then you'll come up with, as we scroll down, the conclusion, which is what you put in a good essay. So if you look at that, if you've been writing essays, you've effectively been writing the structure of a report, in a manner of speaking. There's a couple of other things you might add in there, but effectively that's what is in a good report. You've got introduction, main body, so the main points you're going to go through, and the conclusion. So the main body organises sections in a logical sequence. What you've investigated, what you found, what interpretations and what judgments you have made, and use short, informative headings and subheadings. The conclusion. What has been achieved? And what is the significance of your findings and your discussion? Have your aims been successful or not? The recommendations come into it because when you're writing a report, and this is where it differs more so from an essay, if you like, the recommendations are you're basically steering direction. So I might write a report at work on why a council area, a local government area, might need more outreach workers after hours to engage with young people because of the increase of violence. So I might go through all this and explain and do my research and stats and put it all together. And then in my recommendation, I recommend, following the conclusion, I recommend that council or the board of management consider funding a new youth worker team, 2 youth workers, 2 EFT, 1.0 EFT, which is 1 full-time position, effective full-time, to create an assertive outreach team that will roam around the suburbs after hours at night in a van, trying to engage young people on the streets. And so in that recommendation, they've read it all, they look at my recommendation, they might go, well, as the expert officer, we agree with you. I can see some of that. So that's what a report might have. The references that might be in there might be all the sources that you've used. Again, that's the parallel to an assessment. An essay. I've got assessments on the brain. And then the essay, you might have all the appendixes as well as the references. So you might, and in the references, you don't have, report, you don't have to go as hardcore as Harvard referencing. If you've ever written, essays and you've done the Harvard referencing, yes, Amanda's nodding. So that way, you don't have to go as hardcore as that. You do have to state where you've got your information from if you're evidencing something in a report. And then the appendices might be some graphs or charts or tables or other data. And, really in a report, they're quite laborious, a bit like this speech I'm giving you. So you want to have a bit of jazz and, you want to spirit finger it up a little bit as much as you can with some pictures. And then it kind of gets the interest of everyone. They go, oh, great. And they'll actually try and read it. And also, I like the old adage, a picture tells 1,000 words. If you've got some pictures in reports, people just gravitate to them. And if they explain, a whole raft of things very quickly, people just go, right, I understand that. Fantastic. The last bit is abstracts in introductions and conclusions. What's the difference? An abstract is a brief statement which outlines the full report, what was done, achieved, decided and concluded. The introduction is a section which states your aims and some required background knowledge. Introduction will also outline the body of the report, where you state what you will do. Don't confuse the introduction with the abstract or summary. They're different. Writers often confuse the main purpose behind writing an introduction and an abstract. The common misconception is that one is simply a smaller version of the other. The introduction is a rewritten, chopped up version of the abstract. However, this is not the case. Most reports need an abstract or exec summary, but they're generally more important for technical reports or scientific documents. An abstract is a succinct passage which provides a brief outline on what was achieved, decided, or concluded in your report. So it's just that really bang statement. The exec summary will go around and give a whole summary, where an abstract is just one brief little line that basically says, this is what happened and this was the conclusion. And so it's really quick. The introduction, the aim of an introduction is to state what you've been asked to achieve and list your current course of action. And of course, the conclusion, along with the introduction, abstract is generally the section most read by clients. If you can conclude your work findings well, you facilitate your client's understanding of your work's significance, your achievements, and whether your aims have been successful or not. So within that, you're stating your findings from the analysis of your data, outline possible recommendations, etc. And as we said before, the recommendation is probably better to put another subheading and make it separate. So does that kind of sum up a report? They kind of, you'll see reports are just the way work is, you know, whether you're doing a grant application or whether you've just been asked to report on anything minor at your workplace, any trends, etc. This is a format that you probably use, and people will be able to understand it quite clearly. It's the most common form of reports. But look, you can change it up, but this has been, it's templates are around, they're all over the net. This is the easiest way to probably put one together in your particular workplace that you might be in. Now, the other thing I was going to do is I was just going to pull up the, for today, and pull up, not report writing, where is it? I was going to pull up an oldie that we had looked at, and research scenarios. We went through the research scenarios earlier on, didn't we? What just give me a brief, what did we do on the research scenarios again? Was that homework and we never kind of got? No?
Was it? It was a few weeks back now.
Yeah.
It was 3 weeks ago. That was going to be, I think, takeaway homework, wasn't it?
I think so.
Yeah. So I might just jump into those and have another read. If I can find it again. Okay. So within that,
Oh, yeah.
did we go through this at the time?
No, I don't think we did.
All right, let's go through these. Because that was the other thing I was going to do. Because this is kind of, this leads into report writing, and I think it's important that we kind of have a bit of a scenario. So, you're a working group made up of youth workers involved in local youth services, interagency, of course. A number of workers and services have mentioned that they're noticing an increase in youth homelessness in the area and have having trouble finding supported accommodation for young people. The interagency, so that's like a group of agencies that you might have. Would that be it's at Amanda's house, I think. Yeah, that's cleared it up. Sorry, Amanda, I just muted you. All I could hear was like trucks and things. And
Yeah, I could hear that too.
yeah. So all right. That's why we've got the auto mute, and we can control it. It's a beautiful thing. Thank you very much. So yeah, you back to the scenario, of course. You're a working group made up of youth workers involved in local youth services, interagency. A number of workers and services have mentioned that they are noticing an increase in youth homelessness in the area. So, and look, that's been happening in Melbourne recently. So this is quite, topical. The interagency, so that group that meets, has agreed to investigate this issue, and your working group has been asked to look at the issue in more depth and report back to the next meeting with some recommendations on how this situation might be addressed. So let's go down to number 1. What information do you need in order to develop your understanding of this issue? So between both, throw out some scenarios. What would you need to do, you think? What are some of the, so you've got the scenario. What would you go and do? What would you go and find out?
Map local services.
Thanks, Simon. So did you hear that answer from Simon, who's just jumped in?
What did he say?
Map local services. So you want to know what's going on. You should know that already, though, Simon, because you're an interagency group. The main thing you want to find out is any statistical information. Some of the things that you might want to do, there's an increase in homelessness. It might be that either your workplace or another workplace might have some outreach capacity. So you might want to check areas and see if there's been any proof of this, because at this point it's hearsay. So how do we address this? I mean, I've had this type of scenario come up in an area that I've worked in, and we had to send out workers to see, was this real? So young people have been spotted sleeping rough. It's an expression that they use. And so we've had to check that out. You might go to the police and ask the police, have they noticed an increase? Because the police doing their patrols would certainly notice this activity. And so you would use your networks to validate and see what was actually occurring. If you found some young people, what might happen then?
Speak to them.
Bingo. Interact. Talk to them. How are you, my friend? My name's such and such. I'm from such and such an agency. This is what our agency does. I'm just wanting to have a quick word with you about A, B, or C. Excellent. So what sources of information might you use in order to find out more about this situation and address the things you identified in? So what sources of information might you use in order to find out more about this situation? We all need a coffee.
Individual service stats.
It could be it, yeah. That could be individual service stats. It could be the police again. You could ask the police, do they have any information? Because not might be on an arrest sheet, etc. It could be that it could be, what other bits of information? You could ask local councils. You could ask, because they are on patrol and they might see things, say in parks and gardens, in local councils, they see a lot of homeless people and they're able to do comprehensive reports. Could be anyone who's out and about in neighbourhood. Has there been an increase in any drop-in programs around? You're basically looking for any evidence that supports young people sleeping rough or an increase in homelessness. So you'd be looking at any agency that does that. Are there people presenting at leisure centres looking for showers and they don't want to swim? It's that type of thing. within this, spend some, and this is supposed to be feedback to class, and this was going to go ahead in week 5, but I'm just, we're pushing it, and I'm just making sure it doesn't disappear. But we're going to spend some time looking for further information on these sources and prepare a brief summary of the relevant information you find. So what we're going to do is these 4 questions. We're talking through scenario 1, but scenario 2, I'd like it to be your takeaway homework for everyone out there, so you can put it online. And you don't have to spend a lot of time on it. It's just to keep you ticking and just to get you thinking about what's going on. And so what research methods could you use to gather further information about this issue at a local level? So thinking about research methods. What would a research method be? So how we might gather, pardon?
Looking up information on the internet,
Yeah.
going to local council.
Yeah. So all those things that we're talking about, it could be, and sometimes research methods, remember when we've talked about qualitative and quantitative information? And so quantitative information relates more so to statistical information. Qualitative research refers to story gathering. And so we're gathering those stories. So, you know, it's something to think about at that level. So quantitative, and where might you get that from? So they're things to think about. So scenario 2, you are youth workers that work for a youth service which provides a range of support services to young people in a large regional town. Your manager has mentioned that that the government has recently announced that your region will be receiving a significant number of people in the next few months who are arriving in Australia as refugees from the war in Syria. Your service has not had much experience in working with young people from refugee backgrounds, but your manager is keen to make sure your service is able to provide support to some of the young people who will be arriving as part of this group. So within that, the next 4 steps apply to that. So thinking about, I'll give you a couple of hints, thinking about cultural safety would be one thing. So cultural safety, if I haven't mentioned that to you before, is just understanding the cultural backgrounds and needs of young people. And so it's about researching what the needs, if you know the country that these people are from, and you know that there's a war, you'd be researching everything that these people might be experiencing. So what would people experience from a war-torn place normally? What are some of the key things they may be experiencing that you need to take into consideration?
Violence, phantom.
Yep. Trauma?
Yeah, trauma. PTSD.
Correct, yeah. So yeah, you're picking up on it now. So, they've experienced, and the other thing you need to consider is loss and grief. That loss and grief. So imagine, you know, my neighbourhood now was blown to smithereens, and I was displaced. I missed neighbours. Everything I knew, all that familiarity would disappear, wouldn't it? And so that loss and grief is really important. How that affects us as human beings, how we cope with change, rapid change, and you know what we've lost. It's really important for human beings to go through change at a pace for most of us. And so when that rapid change occurs, that can create some of that post-traumatic stress disorder occurring. So have a think of those next 4 things, and then that's what we'll be looking at. Have I given you that scenario before? I don't think I've loaded that up, have I? Scenario 5 that we're looking at now. I thought I might have, but I will put it up on. No,
I don't remember.
I'm going to throw that up in the forum for everyone to look at, but and to go through. But that's us for this week. That's the main thing that's going to be the takeaway. I'll throw that up online tonight, and get that going. Also throw up a recording of this for those out there, so they can also do the homework, which would be really great if you did. It's part of the learning journey, the scaffold of learning, just to lock in a few of those things. But thank you for coming tonight, and I'll see you next week. All the signs will be marked by next week too, so we can celebrate another one down. Be great. But I'll put this up, hop into the homework, and I'll talk to you next week. Okay, guys?
Cool.
Ciao.
Bye, Amanda.
Bye.
Bye.
See you, mate.
I'm staying online. The ladies have to leave the meeting.
I'll restart.
Okay. Bye.
Ciao.